Hello, everybody. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live Developing Mental Resilience, Managing Stress. Today with me is Jules Allen Rowland. Jules Allen Rowland is a functional medicine practitioner in the lifestyle aspect. Functional medicine looks at the interplay between our genes, nutrition, lifestyle, exercise, and stress, and how this relates to health and chronic non-communicable conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, cancer, and aging. And today I'm also with Themba, who is a personal finance expert. Themba is a chartered accountant, who also holds a master's in business administration. Themba is a facilitator and a trainer in risk management, asset and liability management, and investment management. And over the period of 15 years, Themba has done presentations on personal financial management to several white collar and blue collar conference audiences. If you are joining us, just type in where you're joining us from. If you have any questions, you type in your questions, then they will be addressed accordingly. And you can invite and take a friend. So I'll start with Jules. Jules, what is stress? And why is it when someone is stressed, they cannot concentrate or they can't think clearly?
Hi, Taffy and Themba. It's so nice to join you. So I hope you can hear me clearly. Yeah, so stress is really the name that we give the physiological response in our body when we're dealing with anything to do with what the body sees as survival. So the body's really all about survival. So when the body responds to to something that acts on it, there's a cascade of neurotransmitter release, chemical release, hormone release, neurotransmitter release in the brain, and the body feels a response to this release. So, for example, let's say you are walking down the street and you pass a drive and a dog runs out, and your body immediately responds to that stressor, and it releases a whole lot of adrenaline, and the adrenaline allows your body to react to that particular stress. So in this case, when it's a very acute response, so it's a very sudden response, the body is amazing. So the body just knows time to survive. And what it does is it releases a cascade of hormones. So for example, we've all heard of the word adrenaline. So adrenaline basically it's actually a neurotransmitter, but so in other words, it's a chemical in the brain, but it allows the body to react quickly and instantly to whatever's acting on it. So you then, in that particular case, would either turn around and fight, or better, if it's a dog, to run away if you can. So what the body does is that when there is a stress action, the body then responds in either a chronic way or an acute way. So if it's acute, it's sudden, but if the body has a long-term stressor, so we call that a chronic stress response, the body gets the same hormones and the same neurotransmitters and chemicals flooding the body as it does when it's a sudden response like a dog. Now, because the body's very smart, the body knows that when you are reacting suddenly to a particular stressor, you don't need to think. All you need is to run away or turn and fight. So the body drains all the blood from what we call the prefrontal cortex, which is this part of the brain here, and it allows the blood to drain into your limbs so that you've got power and you've got blood supply in the limbs so that you can either run away or fight. And this is one of the reasons why when people deal with chronic stress, because the body can't determine the difference between an attack dog, for example, and maybe an unpleasant boss. So let's say you have a work situation where you've got an unpleasant situation at work. The body's constantly pumping out adrenaline, and it pumps out cortisol as well. And I'm going to address cortisol just now, but it pumps out adrenaline. And it is as though the body is almost dealing with an attack dog all the time. And that's why when we're stressed, we don't think very clearly. We suffer from brain fog. We suffer from poor concentrations. And there are other physiological responses, but I'll go through that just now. And that's why when we're stressed, we can't think properly. But it also has a deleterious effect on our health too, but I'll go into that just now. So I hope that's sort of explained to you how the body responds to stress.
Thank you very much, Jules, for the valuable information. Themba, what are the sources of financial stress?
Before I answer your question, Tafazo, from the way that Jules described stress, I just said to myself, I don't want to ever be stressed in my life.
No, wait till I get to the diseases that are associated with the Themba, and you'll definitely decide stress is not on.
I'll just try by all means to avoid stress. But to answer your question, Tafazo, there are so many causes of financial stress. And I'll just talk about 5 common causes of financial stress. The first cause is, one that relates to arrear payments when people can't pay their debts. And here we're talking specifically about, debt that has got a high interest. I heard of a very sad story this week of a businessman who had borrowed from loan sharks. And because he couldn't pay the money, he ended up committing suicide. And so that's the first thing, as a financial expert, I try to advise people by all means not to borrow money from loan sharks, because that's a great source of, that's one of the most common causes of financial stress. So how do you know that you have entered this territory of dangerous, borrowing? I think there are 3 or 4 ways in which you can know. Number one, if the majority of your income is going towards paying debt. So we always talk about a debt to disposable income ratio. To put it simply, if you earn 100 rands and more than 70 rands is going towards paying debt, I think you are approaching stress, territory. Secondly, if you are receiving a lot of legal letters, then you are entering into, territory that will cause you financial stress. But also there are some people who borrow to consume. I also, as a personal finance expert, don't advise people to borrow money so as to consume. If ever you're going to borrow money in your life, just make sure that it's for 2 reasons. If you don't want to be stressed, number one, we always borrow money against appreciating assets. Number 2, we borrow money for productive purposes. You want to borrow to start business. If you are borrowing to consume, you can be sure that you will be stressed at some point. The second source of financial stress is the loss of a job. Many people get stressed when they lose a job or when they are retrenched. That's why we always advise people to, keep at least 3 months worth of salary, because it's been proven that if you are employable, it might take you, 2 to 3 months before you move into the next job. Another source of stress is the rising cost of living. I think we have entered a period of high inflation. And unfortunately, the way that the world works these days is that the rich have got so many tools to protect themselves against inflation. But if you are poor or you are in the middle class, there is very limited tools that you have to protect yourself against the high cost of living. So sometimes when people find themselves in a situation where they can't balance their budgets, they just get stressed, and that's a source of stress, them. Long-term unemployment, failure to get a stable job has also been a source of financial stress for some people. And then another source of financial stress, surprise, surprise, is just, the desire to keep up with the Jones. There are certain people who get stressed because they can't keep up with the Jones. There is a peer group that they benchmark themselves to. And if they find that they can't maintain the lifestyles that other people are maintaining, it just becomes a source of stress. So I can go on, Tafazo, but those 5 are the most, common sources of financial stress that I see as I advise people on their personal finances.
Thank you, Themba, for the 5 sources of financial stress. As we heard, it's not advisable to keep up with the Jones. Jules, if there was one change that would have a greatest positive impact in stress, what would it be?
Okay, so I just want to say first with Themba, that really, it struck me so much, that borrow to consume. That is it's such a perfect phrase for a situation that so many people do, and it ties so closely in with the, keeping up with the Joneses, where you want the best cell phone, and we want to drive, we'll put a car on hire purchase, and because we want to drive a really nice car, instead of thinking, well, put aside money for 3 months. And I mean, that's such good advice. And as I listen to you, I realize, a lot of your reasons are stress responses that some people, they've made bad choices, or they've made difficult choices, and now it's hard for them to get out of them. And what's happening, you're getting the physiological response to choices that they've made. And I would go so far as to say, it is very easy for me to say, well, what, stress is very bad for you, and this is the physiological response in the body, and I'm going to talk about the one change now. And I know that when I give you the one change, people are going to think, well, I would do that if I could. But if one can make just a small, even if it's a 1% difference every single day, and you make a 1% where you save a bit more, or you buy a little bit extra food, or even if it's, now I think we're going into very hard times with, I would go so far as to say, even food shortages and issues like that. And if you've got a fancy car, sell your car. I mean, I'm not a financial person, I just look at these things and think, well, I just want to reduce the response in the body. But all of those, just 1% at a time. Now, so I just want to say now that I'm going to give some suggestions now, but every suggestion I make, please run it by your medical practitioner first. Everything that I say is for informational purposes only. It's not designed to take the place of the advice and your connection with your medical doctor. But the one change that I would say that has the biggest impact on stress response is your ability to sleep. Now, I know that when you can't sleep, and you lie there and you think, what, I mean, that woman, she just said I'm asleep. Well, and if I could, then I would. And what very often happens is that people then resort to sleeping pills. And the problem with a sleeping pill is I associate a sleeping pill with really taking a 10-pound hammer and beating yourself about the head and knocking yourself unconscious. Because what happens when we sleep is we actually have the 2 phases in sleep that are really important. There's the sort of the deep phase, and then there's the REM phase. And the REM phase we call that the rapid eye movement phase. And the body goes in and out in sleep in these phases. And each phase is approximately 90 minutes long. And one should, and I realize what I'm doing is I'm giving you the shoulds, and then I'm going to give you some suggestions just now. But one should really sleep for 7 to 8 hours every single night. So if you are somebody who can sleep but is choosing not to, my suggestion to you is don't make that choice. Make the choice to sleep 7 to 8 hours every single night. Because what happens in the 2 phases, so in the deep phase sleep and the REM phase, is the physiological response in the body is slightly different. So for example, in one of the phases, that's the phase, the REM phase, is when your body lays down its memories. So it cements the memories in your mind. And this is important for mental clarity. So so you need the REM phase, but you also need the deep sleep phase, because in the deep sleep phase, the body manages your blood sugar, for example. So people who don't sleep well, they get overweight. And it's a strange thing that poor sleep, it increases your risks of Alzheimer's and type 2 diabetes, and you get fatter if you don't sleep well, and it increases your problems with stress, as I've mentioned. So a few things that I'm going to suggest. The one thing is The body likes to sleep in a completely dark environment. So there are two things that you can do. The one is to change your curtains. So even if you buy black curtains, cheap black fabric, or even a sheet, a black sheet, you just put Velcro along the top, and then you can use fabric glue, and you stick the Velcro on the inside of your curtains, and so that you've got complete blackout curtains. So that the body, even to the cells, you know, so it's not just through the eyes, even the cells are sensitive in your skin to complete dark. So that's the first thing. Secondly, what you can do is you can buy an eye mask, you know, Dis-Chem sells eye masks, and you just put an eye mask on so that it is completely dark. The body just loves that. The third thing that you can do is that in actual fact, what allows the body to go to sleep is the slight cooling of the body. So to be too hot is going to block your ability to sleep. Now, we live in this beautiful warm country, which is so fantastic in winter, but in summer we can get very hot. So generally, I'm sure many people who are listening can say, you know, they toss and turn and when it's hot. So what I would suggest then, you get a plant mister, you know, like a plant spray. You put clean water in it. When you've got your sheet on, you mist the surface of your sheet with a fine misting of water. When the water evaporates, it cools the sheet, and then it cools you underneath the sheet and allows the body to drop off, to go to sleep. One of the reasons why showering, having a warm shower or warm bath before sleep helps you fall asleep is not because you're warming the body. It causes a dilation of the blood vessels on the surface of the skin, and this drains the blood away from the core of the body to the surface of the skin, and it cools the core of the body, and that helps one to just slowly go to sleep. The other thing is, don't eat too late at night, because then the body's trying to digest, you know, and when you're trying to digest food, you're not going to go to sleep. Just trying to think, yes, and also people who struggle from bloating or reflux. If you lie down too soon, you're not going to sleep, because if you've got reflux or you've got this acid burn in the back of your throat, I mean, that of course is, you know, you're not going to sleep well with that. If you are in a situation where you are going to take sleeping pills, the sleeping pills that are on the market at the moment, really what they do, basically, they affect the chemistry of the brain where they knock you unconscious. Now, I know that sleep, for some people, you're so desperate to sleep that you'll take anything. But there are a couple of things that you can just buy off the shelf that help. One is called 5-HTP. 5-HTP is a compound that you can, Dis-Chem has got it. You just can go and you can buy it off the shelf. And what it does is it produces serotonin. And we've all heard of serotonin. Serotonin is our happy neurotransmitter. It makes us feel good. But serotonin is the precursor to melatonin, and melatonin is the chemical that helps us to sleep. So 5-HTP helps the body to make serotonin, and serotonin helps the body to make melatonin. So it's advisable you can take it around about midday and then just before you go to sleep, just to help your body to make melatonin. The second thing is called GABA. That's GABA. And GABA works like a calming blanket. It's a neurotransmitter. You can also buy it off the shelf. And what it does, it blankets our neurotransmitter. So when we've had a very stressful day and there's a lot of adrenaline pumping, GABA just cools the adrenaline down so that our body can relax. So GABA is lovely to help you sleep. And then the two amino acids that are the sleep amino acids, one is called taurine. Again, you can just buy them off the shelf. And the other one is called theanine, and green tea has got theanine in. So if you take green tea before you go to sleep, that helps your body. The theanine, both theanine and taurine are amino acids that are important in that process the body needs to slowly fall asleep. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Alan. Jules, that's very helpful. I like the green tea. At least that's I think I will implement immediately. I'm not sure about the black sheets and the black curtains, but
it's worth it if you can't sleep. It works. It really does work.
Thank you very much. Themba, how do I deal with financial stress?
Before I answer that question, I think I got two ideas from Jules that I will implement immediately. So the first thing, like you, Taffy, Green tea. I think I will start drinking green tea. If Jules says is the way to go, probably I should start doing it. But you also spoke about sleep. I used to think that if you want to make money, sleep as little as possible. Until I read about a certain billionaire called Jeff Bezos, the guy who founded, Amazon. He actually believes in sleeping 8 hours a day because he feels that when he sleeps, even when he was an executive at Amazon, that's what he was doing. That's when I realized that look, it's not so much how many hours you sleep, but it's how effectively you use your time when you are awake. Taffy has asked me to just share on how we can deal, proactively with financial stress. I can talk and talk, but I want to focus up on stress that is as a result of being in debt, and just to give people 7 ideas on how you can proactively deal with financial stress, particularly stress that is as a result of being in debt. So the first idea is that if you're an employee, particularly in a corporate, most corporates now have wellness programs where if you find yourself being stressed, you can actually phone the hotline and they will give you counseling advice. The thing about financial stress, some people believe that, I can hope myself out of debt and hope myself out of financial stress. One of the things that I normally say to people is that hope is not a strategy, particularly when it comes to dealing with debt. I mean, you have to be very practical about it and take certain practical steps. Apart from approaching wellness, organizations, there are people who provide support. Whether it's Lifeline or any of these depression groups. There comes a time when you are financially stressed. Instead of waiting until it's too late, you might want to seek expert help there. The other thing that you can do is and I also teach the art of negotiation. Um, if you are stressed, just confront your creditors and negotiate with them. What I see most of the time is that people run away from their creditors. And that is the worst thing that you can do, especially if you are in financial distress. There are people who then ignore calls from their lenders. That's not a good thing to do. And even when you take that particular call, the other temptation that people most have is that they overpromise. So these people, when they phone you, they want you to give a commitment in terms of when you're actually going to pay. And most people are unrealistic. They will say, no, 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 tomorrow I will have the money. Don't worry. And that creates more stress. And so don't overpromise. If the money is not there, I actually find that some lenders will actually accept it if you say, at the moment I don't have any money, but I am committed to paying this debt. Because what it does is that it doesn't put you under unnecessary financial pressure, but also you're going to score points with the lenders. So I don't advise people to run away from their creditors. If you will be bold to run after your creditors, I mean, that's the thing that I would advise. If you get into a situation where, after having taken advice, you need to file for debt counseling. So there are legal remedies that are available for people who are in financial distress. In South Africa, you can file for debt counseling. And what debt counseling affords you to do is that it affords you some breathing space where an expert can negotiate with your creditors, and it gives you breathing space in order to recover. Now, here is the thing. I have seen people get into financial problems time and time again, and sometimes they don't learn. You'd think that somebody who has gone through debt counseling and has come out of that process would have learned one or two things. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. there are people who get into debt over, time and time again, which is why I believe in coaching people in managing money so that they develop the good habits to be able to increase in prosperity instead of paying a lot of interest to the lenders. It's also very important, number 5, when you are in financial distress, to focus on what you can control. There are things that you can't control, and I think psychologically you just need to reconcile to your, to the fact that I can control this. But focus on things that you can control. So let me give you one idea on some of the things that you can control, which many people refuse to do. If you're driving an expensive car, you might want to downgrade. So downgrading your lifestyle is a practical thing that you can control. I once visited a pawn shop, a 24-hour pawn shop. And what I saw as I was talking to the pawn shop owner, I saw a lady with jewelry, all over, driving into the pawn shop. And she was driving a Discovery. She took out a laptop to pawn to the pawn shop. She took all the jewelry that was on her, because these people do also take jewelry, for pawning. And I just wondered to myself, why would somebody be driving a Discovery 4 and be pawning a laptop? Why don't you just drive a cheaper car like a Toyota and be able to manage your finances? That's when I realized that people, when they are in a financial hole, they continue digging. One of the advice that you will receive from any financial expert is that when you are in a financial hole, stop digging, stop getting into more debt, right? Because many people continue digging, they borrow to pay this particular loan. And if they can't pay that particular loan, they borrow from relatives. And so they go into this debt spiral. So one of the classical advice that you can ever receive is that when you are in a financial hole, stop digging, right? And it's not easy to do. Another idea is that when you are stressed because the budget can't balance, um, instead of being under pressure, because sometimes these lenders can put you under a lot of pressure, you need to use a budget to prioritize your spending. I have seen people succumb to pressure to such an extent that they end up using all their salary to pay debt and forget that they have to live and to buy food. And as a result, because they have to buy food and do these other things, they go into a debt spiral again. They start digging again. And when they get money, the debtors are phoning, and then they pay the money to the creditors, sorry, and they continue into this spiral. So it becomes very important that you have the presence to budget and not to succumb to pressure. I know it's easier said than done, but it's something that can be done. And the last idea that I would really want to give to people if you're under financial stress is to find ways. I know Jules said, and I take Jules' point that sometimes it's very difficult to think clearly when you are under financial stress. But to the extent to which you can do that, try to find ways to earn extra income, right? So many people these days are finding a side hustle or a side gig, something to do. But the other thing that I normally recommend to people is to negotiate for a raise. I see that sometimes people in corporate employment, they just accept whatever increase, that they are getting. If you are good, if you are adding value in that particular company, have the boldness to go and negotiate for a raise. I don't have time to tell you some of the stories that I have seen in real practice, but I have seen people who have been, forthright with their bosses and said, "Look, I can't balance my budget. Is there anything that the company can help me to do?" And sometimes those people actually get their way. So just learn to negotiate. It's something that can be done to the extent possible. If you're not going to strain yourself, work overtime. Find ways of earning extra income. Those are the ideas that I would want to put on the table, Tafadzwa, on how to deal proactively with financial stress.
Thank you very much, Themba, for that. I actually remembered yesterday I was minding my own business. Then I get a call from someone and they say, you know what, this is our birthday month for their company. They own a cell phone. It's a very common cell phone company. And they say, we want to give you a gift. So I listened and they said, we will deliver it for free. And then they told me all the benefits. I was almost tempted until I said, okay, can I Google the kind of phone that you want to offer? Then I realized that as much as they were saying it's going to be cheaper, even the amount that they were saying that phone costs, it was not what Google was saying. So yesterday I was actually helped by Google. Then I just thanked them and said, thank you for the gift. I think I'm happy with my my current phones. So yes, there can be a lot of pressure to be in financial debt. So we thank you for reminding us not to keep on digging into debt. Jules, why is finding a way to manage stress important for longevity as well as peace in the moment?
Okay, Taffy, I'm going to go into that. I first want to say, Themba, when I listen to what you say about finance, there are so many similarities in the process of becoming financially healthy to becoming physically healthy. And what you just said about hope yourself out of financial debt, I can say the same. So many of my clients too, they want to be healthy, but they a lot of the time it's because they don't really know what steps to take to become healthy. But they also don't want to look at it because they might be having certain symptoms. They might be diagnosed with diabetes, for example, or insulin resistance, or an ulcer, or any of these physiological health problems. And they don't know where to go. They don't know where to start. And they just hope maybe tomorrow it'll just all go away. And as you say, they also continue to dig holes for their financial, as they do for their financial health, so they do for their physical health. Because with stress too, what very often happens with stress, and this is where there's a lot of overlap, is that when people stress, they tend to feel they need to reward themselves. So for example, they tend to drink more, and alcohol costs money, or they reward themselves. They buy boutique coffees, very, very expensive coffees, for example, because they feel, I'm feeling so depressed and I'm feeling so low. I need this to help me feel better. And in so doing, they really are just digging a deeper and deeper hole. And I think when you don't know from a health perspective, and I'm sure there's parallel and overlap here, but from a health perspective, so what I advise my clients to do is that first of all, you write down clearly where you are. So you write down, what am I eating? How am I sleeping? What are my stress levels? How am I exercising? What am I actually doing? And no judgment with it. You just write it down, every single little thing. And then obviously, as you say with finance, to get expert advice, because there's a lot of advice that one can give that has a very far reaching benefit, and it's maybe one change or two changes. And then you systematically work through your list and you make small changes, because in 6 months, when you look back and you've made all these small changes, you suddenly think, wow, you know what, from a health perspective, I'm feeling so much better because I am doing X, Y, Z. And the problem with leaving it, because health and longevity, the past 2 years have taught us that we need to be in the best physical state that we possibly can, not only because we want to feel good, but we want to be, our immune system needs to be strong. We need to be resilient against whatever is coming our way in terms of infectious diseases. And the stronger we are and the healthier we are, the better we're going to be able to cope. And certainly with COVID, one of the biggest problems with COVID were the comorbidities that put people who had these comorbidities at much greater risk of dying from COVID than those people who didn't have any of the comorbidities. And one of the biggest comorbidity was obesity and insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. And stress makes those conditions worse, because what happens when you stress, remember I spoke about adrenaline being released when you're stressed. Whenever adrenaline is released, another chemical is released with it, and that chemical is called cortisol. And cortisol is almost like a traffic cop. What it does, it calls from the muscles stored blood sugar, because when you're stressed and the body can't tell, do I need to run away or do I need to turn and fight? It needs sugar to be able to have energy to do that. And we store sugar in our liver and in our muscles. So what the body wants to do is the body wants to mobilize that sugar so you can use it. And the body uses cortisol to do that. And cortisol and stress go together. When you're stressed, your body's pumping out cortisol. And it's really effectively, when you're stressed, when you're chronically stressed, the body's pulling through the action of cortisol, it's pulling sugar from your muscles and from your liver. And it's as though you're having a little snack without the pleasure of putting anything in your mouth. So managing stress is very important, because that influence of sugar in our body affects our risks of type 2 diabetes, heart attack risk, Alzheimer's risk. Even cancer is affected by the amount of sugar in our body, how the body manages sugar. So there are many, many really, really simple ways to manage just one thing, and that is, for example, sugar management. And that has a blanket beneficial effect on our health and on our longevity, and whether we are at risk of what we call these non-communicable diseases. So managing stress really isn't a luxury at all. And, to go back, Themba, to your, the thought about, a lot of people say, you know what, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Then I'll get enough sleep then. But the problem is when you don't sleep, you're going to call death closer to you. So to manage your stress as managing your finances, you know what, it's not a luxury at all.
Thank you very much, Jules, for reminding us that managing your stress is not a luxury. And I don't know why they made sugar sweet, because
I know, and chocolate.
Yes, all the nice things,
all the nice, and bread, all the nice things.
Yes, but we need to manage it. Thank you very much. Themba, before I go to your question, there's a question from Tendai Elliot Gauke. He's asking, there's a property investor who says do not pay more on your mortgage as it has no benefit. Is it true? Then he says, a long time ago, I bought shares from Boca after seeing an advert, but lost all my money. Is it wise to buy shares if you are not too sure of the business they are running, or whether the business will face hardships in future?
Thank you very much, Chafi, for those questions. So I will take the second question. Is it advisable to buy shares if you are not sure? Many people have been made wealthy because of investing in shares. But like everything else, you invest in shares after you've acquired the necessary knowledge and after you have received the right advice. That's why, as part of my approach, you would not have that I've got a belt system. So I take people through a competence framework where they progressively develop their skills. Even when we talk about investing skills, we then teach people some of the skills, with regard to investing. So the short answer to your question is, I do advise people to invest in shares. In fact, for all those that have got money invested in pension funds who are hoping to retire one day, all those monies are invested in shares, actually. But there is a right way of investing in shares. And we'll talk about that. I don't have time, today to talk about that. But simple things like diversifying your portfolio, right? Not putting your eggs in one basket. I think that's great advice, right there. And then instead of just focusing on investing, you also apply certain risk management principles. So that would be the answer to the second question. The answer to the first question that he asked with regard to property, investing. I like property myself because property is an appreciating asset. So if the question is, should I invest in property? My answer is yes. But like everything else, you need knowledge, right? So you mustn't overpay on the bond. Negotiate. I teach people to negotiate as much as possible so that you are not, many people do not know how to negotiate. They don't even know the cost of financial products. The cost of other products is very easy to determine, but the cost of financial products, many people do not know how to determine. So yes, you would want to shop around, make sure that you are paying a cost-effective, bond, and pay that bond as fast as you can. But like everything else, property investments can also go sour. Some of you who are probably passionate about property investment, you might have heard, the term location, location, location. So that's one factor that goes into, the value of a property. The thing about investing, and one of the cardinal laws that I live by, with regard to investing, is look for undervalued assets that will appreciate over time. I learned that from a great investor called Warren Buffett. So it doesn't matter whether it's property, whether it's shares. I don't just buy shares just because somebody said I must buy shares. You look for undervalued property. And one of the things that I learned from Warren Buffett is that you make your profit from day one. Those are some of the things that we'll learn as we go into the investing masterclass. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. So let me just stop there, Taffy, and then probably I can take your last question.
Thank you, Themba. I hope Tendai is listening and it's helpful. Themba, what proactive things can someone do to avoid financial stress?
So I've got 7 ideas again, Taffy, there. The first idea is avoid conspicuous consumption. For some reason, when people have money, they want to make a statement of arrival. So you will see people putting on branded clothes, driving the most expensive cars. They are very conspicuous in their consumption. And even particularly tax law authorities, the way they find tax dodgers is they look at people who are living above their means, who are spending in a conspicuous manner. So one way of proactively avoiding financial stress, I know of one person. I think the matter was in the financial news. He had a successful company, but the tax authorities are pursuing him now for 1.3 billion. Now, where will you get 1.3 billion? But the reason why they start pursuing you is that they've seen your lifestyle. And what I have seen is that people that tend to keep a low profile avoid a lot of things. Have your money, but avoid the temptation of making a statement of arrival. The second proactive thing that you can do is to avoid what we call pride of ownership. Have you ever seen people, particularly with money, they will say, that's my car, that's my house. When you get into financial trouble, the lenders will come and get your house and your car. People who proactively try to avoid financial stress, they would register their properties and their investments in some other vehicle, right? And there are legal ways of doing that. That's part of avoiding the pride of ownership. I have seen people who have made a lot of money, but because they found themselves in debt, when the lenders come knocking on the door, they will take your car, everything registered in your name. So there are clever ways of doing that. The other thing is avoid long-term commitments. especially commitments. You know, Taffy, you were talking about somebody was trying to trap you into a cell phone contract. You know, many people get trapped into these long-term, you know, contracts where they have to pay, you know, a lot of money. And sometimes they can't get out of these, you know, long-term contracts. So think carefully, you know, about it. Another idea is, you know, have an emergency fund, you know, have you know, money stored away for a rainy day. That's a proactive way of dealing with stress. Obviously, there are people who, you know, store money in a savings account somewhere, but then they create a rainy day for themselves and they end up exhausting that emergency account, you know. The other thing that I would want to really advise people to do, and many people don't practice this, banks don't give money to people who are desperate. And what I see is that, you know, if you go to a bank displaying a lot of desperation, you're not going to get money from the bank. So the best time to get a loan from the bank is when you don't need the money, right? So, you know, unfortunately, people don't practice this. You know, when they have got money, they don't put in place facilities to you know, to cater for those eventualities when they will go into financial trouble. So I don't advise people to carelessly use their credit card, but I keep a credit card for a rainy day, right? So the facility is there. If I get into problems, I then use the funds that are there. And that's my way of, you know, financing myself out of financial, you know, stress. Keep your costs low. Very, very important to keep your costs, you know, low. I sometimes give this advice to people. Have you ever seen that if you're working in corporate and you hear that you're going to get a salary raise, some people start spending the money before it even comes because they know that next month I'm going, getting a raise. I don't advise people to do that. My advice to people is that upgrade your lifestyle 2 raises after. So what do I mean by that? If you know you're going to get a raise, a salary raise, don't upgrade your lifestyle. Then you get another raise, don't upgrade your lifestyle. Then you get the third raise, then consider getting, upgrading your lifestyle. You've got people who are very, very keen to upgrade their lifestyle. One of my, favorite heroes as far as money management is concerned is Warren Buffett. Some of you will know that Warren Buffett is a billionaire. And the thing about Warren Buffett is he hasn't upgraded his house since 1960 something. He lives in the same house and drives the same car. And that concept is what some people have referred to as being frugal, frugality. I'm not for, not spending your money. So I'm not saying when you make money, don't spend it. But I'm just saying if you don't have money as yet, don't, be in a hurry to upgrade your lifestyle. That's the point that I'm making, here. Talking about upgrading and downgrading, I've already made this point and I will make it, again. Downgrade your lifestyle before life downgrades you. So be proactive, about it. Then my last idea is that always keep on the right side of the law. I have seen people get into financial problems, particularly with regard to tax payments and tax dodging, right? Because your tax affairs are not in order. For some reason, people, and I'm like that as well. I don't enjoy paying my taxes. But my advice is that stay on the right side of the law. As far as tax is concerned, we always say this thing that tax avoidance is legal. So there are ways of avoiding tax, but tax evasion is illegal. So don't be a tax dodger or somebody who wants to evade tax. You might not be financially clued up, but just get a sense of whether you are complying with the laws of the land or you are not complying. Because what I see most of the time is when people, particularly celebrities, they dodge taxes, and then it always catches up with you. So that's another way of proactively dealing with financial stress. It's called tax planning. We also plan our estate. So in financial planning, in financial management, it's very important to plan, not only budget, setting financial goals, planning your estate, planning your tax affairs. All of those things are things that are great, to do. So let me stop there, Taffy, because time is limited. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Just a concluding remark from both of you. I'll start with Jules. There's Nonhlanhla was saying she's feeling overwhelmed. What would you say to Nonhlanhla in closing?
Nonhlanhla, I'm assuming you're talking about overwhelmed in terms of what you need to do for your health. So what I would suggest is the first thing you do is, as I said, you just sit down and you write everything to do with your health onto a piece of paper, so that you're very clear now, where am I? What do I eat? How do I feel? What am I spending on my health? All of those things, you just put it down on paper. And then you start with one small step, just one small step. And you achieve that one small step. And the one small step that I'm going to suggest that you take, and I think it's because it probably affects us all. I mean, Taffy, you and I, we all eat sweets and we all eat chocolate, and that is to cut down on processed food. And people have a perception that being healthy and eating healthy food is very expensive. And that the reason that they have this perception is because what they want to do is that they want to keep the unhealthy foods that they eat, and then they want to add some healthy stuff on top of that. And then they're adding on extra cost. So if you write down everything where you are now, and you can eliminate, so it's almost investing in your health for the future, one small step at a time. That would be the advice that I would give you in terms of your health. So the first thing is, and for your children, cut out all processed food. When you look at your plate, your food must look like food, not like it comes out of some factory. It must, cereal, for example, does not look like food. It just looks like cardboard. But if you create a situation where you're eating lots of vegetables and salads and you're staying away from the processed food, your body will love you for that. And you will save money long term, because people forget that when they're young and their body can cope with what I call health insults, basically, it is going to catch up with you later on. And while you may now not be spending a lot of money on your health, if you don't address your health now and invest in health, when you're older, then you are going to be in trouble and it's going to cost you a lot of money. So I hope that's helped.
Thank you, Jules, for that. Over to you, Themba.
Nonhlanhla, I've been overwhelmed before. I know exactly how it feels. You feel like you are drowning. You feel like you are not in control of anything, in life. I've been overwhelmed before. I'm not a health person. I'm not a health expert, obviously. So my advice is from a financial point of view. I think when you are overwhelmed, you start getting, stress in your life. It's very important, number one, to identify the source of that stress. What is it that is stressing you? From what Jules was presenting today, I understood that there are different stressors. There are things that stress. So to me, it's very, very important. What is that thing that is overwhelming you? Is it finances? Right. When we talk about finance, we are now being specific. That's the thing that is stressing me. Then from there, once you have identified what it is that is stressing you and overwhelming you, then you can move on to, my next, step. My step number 2 is, what is it that I can control? What is it that I can't control? I have learned not to worry about things that I can't control. They are always things that I can't control. Because sometimes stress comes from worrying about things that you can't control. When you are blacklisted, uh, and there is very little room for you to maneuver, there are many things that are outside of your control. So what I always do when I'm overwhelmed is I look at the things that I can control and I build my plan around, the things that I can control. For example, if I can cut costs here and there, that's the thing that I can control. If I can downgrade, if I can, create more income, those are the things that I can control. I don't worry about things that I can't, I can't control at all. The third thing, which is similar to what Jules is saying, is that it starts with small steps. I've never seen somebody who is overwhelmed, who immediately recovers. I think there are people who are like that. When I was overwhelmed, I was drowning in debt. That's why I'm very passionate about coaching people out of debt, because there was a time when every other day I was receiving lawyers' letters. I don't know if anybody has been in those situations. And that's actually stressing and overwhelming. But what I have learned is that I needed to develop a plan, not to panic, but take small steps, as long as, and when you take those small steps, it's very important to celebrate small achievements. When I was going on a journey of getting out of debt, I would celebrate even the small debts that I have paid. I owed somebody some money, I paid it, then I celebrate and reward myself for that small step. So along the journey, you are going to score, small victories. I know sometimes we have got this big bang theory where, we've got, we suddenly, come out of a situation. It may happen, but in most cases, it's going to take quite some time. And so it's very important that you pace yourself as you work. To me, the most important thing is to have a plan, right? When you have a plan to get out of a situation and not to throw your hands in the air, I think that's very, very important. And then the other thing that I would do is to talk to somebody when I'm overwhelmed. I find that confiding in somebody, particularly experts who can help, is very important, because there are a lot of bright ideas out there. And there is an expression which you might have heard: iron sharpens iron. You are going to talk to somebody who's going to give you a clever idea, who's going to connect you to somebody. So I find that people who tend to isolate themselves when they are overwhelmed, they just drown because they don't have a support system. And I've found that, creating a support system for yourself, especially in instances where you are overwhelmed, just try to create a support system. We always need a support system. Doesn't matter whether we're talking about financial stress or any kind of stress, and having support from people becomes very, very important. And that's what I would say, Tafazo, in response to that question.
Thank you very much, Jules and Themba. And I think Nonhlanhla, those things, we have learned a lot. We do what we can control. If you're a Christian, if there are those things that you can't control, you trust in God, you take them to God. He is very good at taking care of those things that we can't take care of. So I encourage you to trust in God, and you do what you can, and God will do what you can't. And you find, before you know it, you will have overcome the overwhelmment. Okay, thank you very much again. If you want to get hold of Jules, we can visit their website, www.livetoa100.com.
.co.za. It's .co.za.
Thank you for the correction. So it's www.livetoa100.co.za. live-to100.co.za, and 2 is a number. Live to 100, 2 is a number. We can also get hold of Themba. He has a YouTube account, manage of finances like a black belt, or we can visit his website, www.duplexinstitute.com. You can also follow our YouTube channel, The Dream That Was Worth Fighting For. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope we will implement what we have learned so that we overcome stress and we don't keep on digging into the financial hole. We appreciate your support. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you, Taffy. Thank you, Themba. Bye-bye.